Okay, good morning. Let's begin. It's Parshas Chaye Sarah. If you're using the art scroll, we're on page 112, Perek Chof Daled, Psukim Chof Gimel through Samach Zayin. It's the marriage of Yitzchak to Rivka, part 2. Part 1 we did last year. Part 2 we're doing this year. Let's take a look at the Psukim. We're in the middle of the story. Okay? Pasuk Perek Chof Daled, Pasuk Chof Gimel, page 112. Vayomer bas miyat hagidino lehayesh beis avich makom lanu lalin. So Eliezer turns to Rivka and he says, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for me to spend the night?" Vatomer Elov bas Besuel anochi, and she responds, "I am the daughter of Besuel ben Milcah." The Besuel ben Milcah asher yodal lenachor. She gives the whole family lineage. She says, "I'm Besuel's the son of Milcah, who was born to Nahor." Okay. Vatomer Elov gam tevin gam mispo ravi manu gam makom lalun. And she even said, "Even straw, and we have enough to feed your animals as well. Just come, please, and lodge with us." Vayikoda ish vayishtachu laHashem. And so Eliezer is called Ish in this case. His name is not mentioned, but he said, so the man bowed low, and he prostrated himself to Hashem. He thanks Hashem for, look, that he's found Rivka. Vayomer Baruch Hashem Elokei Adoni Avraham. He says, Baruch Hashem Elokei Adoni Avraham, Asher lo azav chasdov amitomi mi'im Adoni, Anochi baderach nochani Hashem beis achei Adoni. And he says, blessed be Hashem, God of my master Avram, who has not withheld his kindness and truth from my master. As for me, Hashem has guided me on the way to the house of my master's brothers. He's thanking Hashem for everything that has happened, that he's found Rivka. And Rivka runs to her mother's house, and she says all that has transpired. Rivka ach ushmo Lavan, and Rivka had a brother, his name Lavan. Vayoratz Lavan elo ish achutza elo ayin, and Lavan runs to meet this man. He wants to see who this man is, right by the spring. Vayikir os es hanezem es hatzmidim v'ayidei achoso chushmo es divrei Rivka achoso lemor kodiber elai ha'ish vayvo ha'ish v'inei omed al agmalim al ha'ayin. And just 1 second, let me let everybody in. Whoops, I didn't see, somebody else is waiting. Okay, for he saw the nose rings and the bracelets on his sister's hands, and upon his hearing all that his sister Rivka had to say, telling him this is what this man spoke, he approached the man who was still standing by the camels by the spring. Vayomer bo Baruch Hashem. He said, come, O blessed of Hashem, why should you stand outside when I have cleared the house and a place for the camels? Of course, Chazal place all of the pieces together, and he says, when does he say that? Only after he sees all of the jewelry. Lavan is very impressed with the jewelry that Eliezer is carrying and is giving his sister. He says, come in. Why should you stand outside? And Lavan gives Eliezer, and he gives his servants, and he gives the camels also to eat. Excuse me, I skipped. No, right? Okay. Vayusam lefanov le'achol vayomer lo ochal ad im dibarti devarai vayomer daber. And they place food in front of him. He should sit down now and eat, right? He must be tired. And no, Eliezer says, I don't want to eat until I say my piece. So here, now we're going to get the rendition of the story from Eliezer, Vayomar. And he said, Evad Avram Onochi, I want you to know who I am. I'm the servant of Avram. That's who I am. Vayomar Hashem, V'Hashem beirachas Adoni me'od vayidol. Hashem has greatly blessed my master, and he's prospered. He's given flocks, cattle, silver and gold, servants and maidservants, camels and donkeys. Everything you can imagine. Avram, my master, has received all of this from Hashem. Vatelet Sarah Eshes Adoni Ben La Adoni Acharei Ziknaso Vayiten Lo Es Kol Asher Lo. And the Sarah, my master's wife, gave birth to a son after she had grown old, and he gave him all that he possesses. Vayashbieni Adoni Lemor Lo Tikach Isha Livni Mibnos Haknani Asher Anochi Yoshe B'Artzel. And my master made me swear, and I took an oath. Do not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites to whom we live in this land. Imlo el beis avi telech el mishpachti v'lakachta isha livni. I want you to go to my father's house, to my family, and take a wife from there for my son. V'omar el adoni ulai lo telecha isha acharai. And so I told my master, perhaps I'll go, but maybe I won't be able to convince a woman to go with me. Vayomer Elov Hashem Asher Yisalachti Lefonov Yishlach Malacho Itoch Bitzliach Darkech V'Lokachta Isha Livnimi Mishpachti U'Mebeis Avi. And so my master replied, when I said maybe there won't be a woman that will follow me, he says, don't worry, Hashem will walk with you and he will send you an angel with you and make your journey successful, and you will take a wife of my son from my family, from my father's house. Don't worry, everything's going to work out. And he then said, if nothing happens, then you're absolved from my oath. Don't worry. If you're not able to convince a woman that you found for my son, don't worry. The oath has been cleaned from you. You don't have to worry. And so now he tells him. Now he's repeating all of this to Besuel and to Lavan. He says, and I came today to the spring. Va'omar Hashem Elokei Adoni Avram im yeshcha no matzliach darki asher anochi olich olea. And I came to the spring and I said, Hashem, God of my master Avram, if you would graciously make successful the way which I go, what should he do? Hinei anochi nitzav al ein hamayim va'yoah halmo hayotzes lishov va'amarti eleh ashkini no me'at mayim mikadeich. And I said to Hashem, behold, I am standing by the spring of the water. Let it be that the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, please give my water to drink from your jug. Please give me from your jug some water. Va'amra elai, and she will say, Gama tosh te v'gam legamalecha ishav. Not only she'll give me, but she'll give my camels as well. Hi ha'isha asher hochiach Hashem leven adoni. It will be a sign that she's the right woman for my master's son. Ani terem achaled ledaber libi v'nei Rivka yotzes v'chadal shimchava tered ayanova tishov v'omar ileh hashkini no. And that's exactly what happened, right? I was standing there, and Rivka shows up. He says, and she offers me to drink. Vatamaher v'toret kadom yolel v'tomer shesei v'gam gamalecha hashker v'isht v'gam hagamalim hishkasa. And Pasuk Memvav, and she hurried and lowered her jug from upon her, and she gave me to drink, and she gave also the camels to drink. And then I asked her, tell me, whose daughter are you? And she told me exactly who she was. She's the daughter of Besulel ben Nachar, who Milcah gave birth to. Asim hanesem alapo. And then in response, what did I give her? I gave her the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her hands. Then I bowed and prostrated myself to Hashem. Hashem Elokei Adoni Avram Asher Baderech Emes Lokachas Basachi Adoni Livno. And I prostrated myself before Hashem, and I blessed Hashem, and I said, God of my master Abraham, who led me a true path to take the daughter of my master's brother for his son. Now, and now, if you intended to do the kindness and truth with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, and I will turn right, and I will turn to the left, or I'll turn to the left. And after hearing all of this, Besuel and Lavan answer, well, this clearly is from God. We can't respond good or bad. This clearly, the story that you're telling us, all happened. This is clearly in the hands of God at work. Here's Rivka before you take her. Usihi Isha leven adonecha kasher diber Hashem, and she'll be the wife for your master's son, just like Hashem spoke. Kasher shama eved Avram es divreihem vayishtachu artza laHashem. And it was then when Avram's servant Eliezer heard their words, he prostrated himself to the ground to Hashem. Vayotze eved klei chesed klei zav v'godim vayitin leRivka. The servant brought out Eliezer, meaning the servants Eliezer, brought out objects of silver and gold and garments and gave them to Rivka, and delicious fruits he gave to his brother and to her mother. So they ate, they drank, and he and the men that were with him went to sleep that night. And when they arose the next morning, Eliezer turns to Lavan, right? Because it seems Besuel has disappeared. Okay, Chazal, Rashi have dealt with that. And he says, send me to my master. Let us go. You let me take now Rivka, and I'm going to leave. And now suddenly he's changing his tune, right? And now Lavan speaks up, and the mother says, well, let Rivka stay here for a year or 10 months, then she will go with you. Vayomer alehem al ta'achru osi, v'Hashem itzliach darki, shalchuni v'chol atoni. He said to them, Eliezer responds, do not delay me now that Hashem has made my journey successful. Send me and I will go to my master. Let us go now. Hashem clearly has endorsed this. There's no reason to delay. Vayomru nikro la na'arov nishalos piyah. And so they responded, well, let's call Rivka and see what she has to say. Right? We've endorsed it yesterday. Now today they're saying, let's slow down the process. He says, don't slow down the process. They say, okay, let's see what the Na'ara, what Rivka has to say. Vayomru nikro la Na'ara, let's call her and see what she has to say. Vayigru la Rivka, so they call her. Vayomru eleha hatelchi imo ish hazeh vatomer elech. And they present the question, are you going with him? And she says, yes, I am going. And so exactly what do? They escorted Rivka, their sister, with her nurse. Her nurse is Devorah, right? As well as Avram's servants and his men. So now who's leaving? They're all leaving, Rivka with her and Devorah as well. And they blessed Rivka, and they said, this bracha, by the way, we say at every bedekin, we say, our sister, may you come to be thousands of myriads, and may your offspring inherit the gate of its foes. If only people would know what we're giving that bracha. You should have children and children and children, right? Without stop. That's the bracha that we give. Okay. Atokam Rivka v'narosev v'tir kavna alag malim v'teilachna acharei ish v'yikach ha'eved es Rivka v'yelach. Samach Aleph 61. He says, then Rivka rose with her maidens, and they rode upon the camels and proceeded after the man. The servant took Rivka and went. So they all go. Yitzchak ba, now we're going to get the picture, the other side of the picture. Where's Yitzchak? Yitzchak ba mi ber lachai roi. And Yitzchak, now, not there, where he is, came from to ber lachai roi, for he dwells, for who Yoshe beretz hanegev, he dwells in south of the country where Gaza, by the way, is. Vayetze Yitzchak, that's exactly where he is. He's right there by Beersheba. That's what's happening, right? Okay. Okay. Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basada lifnos arev vayisayinav vayarvi negem alim ba'im. Now Yitzchak, we're seeing Yitzchak. Yitzchak went to, it says lasuach, and they translate it as supplicate in the field. He went to do something in the field. Lifnos erev, before night fell. Vayisayinav vayarvi negem alim ba'im, and he lifts his eyes and he sees the camels are coming. And Rivka lifts her eyes and she sees Yitzchak, and she falls off her camel. And she turns to Eliezer and she says, who's that man in the field that I'm seeing that's coming towards us? And Eliezer says, that is my master. Meaning That's Yitzchak. And she takes a veil and she covers herself. That's one of the sources that we claim that we have bedekin at a chasana, right? And Eliezer repeats the whole story to Yitzchak as kol hadvarim asher saw all that transpired. He tells him. And now what does Yitzchak do? He takes Rivka into his mother's tent. Rivka, and he brings her into the tent of his mother. And he then marries her. And he loves her. And he's comforted on the loss of his mother. Rivka replaces Sarah. That is the story that we have. This is all the rendition through whose eyes? Eliezer. And that's important to remember. The Rav is not interested in dissecting every statement that Eliezer makes. Others do it. If you want to see an excellent treatment, you can study Nechama Leibovich on this parsha, and she analyzes. Let's take a look at, because this is by the way, this is the longest perek in Chumash Bereshis. The longest single perek in Chumash Bereshis is this perek, all about how Eliezer found Rivka. It is the longest by far. Okay, it's not the longest in Chumash, but it's the longest in Chumash Bereshis. And what Nechama Leibovich does is she puts together all this, because it's repeated twice, what happens as the Torah recorded it in Eliezer finding Rivka, and how Eliezer repeats the story to Lavan and Besuel. And he demonstrates there are differences between the way the story was first recounted and nuances that change in how he reports it to Lavan and Besuel. And Nechama Leibovich analyzes why Eliezer does that. Why does Eliezer change where he changes the story? That the Rav is not interested at all in doing. Rather, he focuses on only certain comments that are mentioned in this story that he feels have a message way beyond the story itself for us throughout the generations. And they're brilliant messages as always. So let's go back and let's take a look at Pasuk Lamed Daled. This is where the Rav begins his comments. Paragraph Daled, Pasuk Lamed Daled, page 114. Okay? Vayomer Eved, and Vayomar, Eved Avram Anochi. What does Eliezer, to appreciate what's happening here, go back to Pasuk Lamed Gimel. Lavan and Besuel, Lavan has now said, Rivka says, you have a place in my father's house. You'll be able to stay. Your gemalim will be taken care of. Your men, or everybody can come and they can camp out at my parents' home. No problem. Okay. And Eliezer sees, if you remember, Eliezer sees all of this jewelry flowing out of the hands of Eliezer, and he's very impressed, and he says, come on in, and he makes a big spread for him that night. He says, come on, let's eat. What does Eliezer say? No, before I eat, I have what to say. What is his opening sentence? This fascinates Rav Soloveitchik. Vayomar, Eved Avram Anochi. 3 words, he says. And Eliezer said, Eved Avram Anochi. I am Avram, Eved Avram. I am Avram's servant. That's fascinating. Please be careful here. Note, has he been prompted to say anything? Have they asked any questions? No, they didn't ask him, who are you? Tell us a little about you. No, the only thing that they did is they put a spread out and they said, eat. He says, no, I'm not eating. I want first to let you know. So he is in control of what is happening, right? He's telling us, he's controlling the narrative right now. Before he sits down and eats, and that's crucial to remember. He takes the initiative to tell them what he wants to tell them. In other words, there was no pressure on Eliezer to reveal who he was. This would indicate that Eliezer was demonstrating a perception internally of who he really is, because he doesn't have to say anything. And now he wants to tell them who he thinks he is. His own perception of who he is. This is his personal comprehension of his true identity. Therefore, Rav Soloveitchik says, you got to examine it very carefully. Eliezer is telling us in his own words exactly who he is. The Rav notes he chooses his words with precision. He says, Eved Avraham Anochi. I am Avraham's servant. That is not identical to saying Eved le'Avraham Anochi. What does Eved le'Avraham Anochi mean? I am a servant to Abraham. I'm not a servant to Abraham. I am Abraham's servant. What's the difference? Eved le'Avraham Anochi. Eved le'Avraham Anochi demonstrates, Rav Soloveitchik notes, he calls it a juridic social status. What does that mean? In typical Rabbi Soloveitchik lingo, what it means is it's a legal status. I'm Avram's servant. I'm Avram's servant, like there were servants, there were slaves in those days, right? That was property. I'm Avram's property. Eved le'Avram is I'm Avram's property. That's not what he says. I'm not a servant to Avram. I'm not like slaves that are purchased in the market to Avram. That would be Eved le'Avram. That's not what he says. What does he say? He says, Eved Avraham Anochi. I am Avraham's servant. In other words, he indicates that he belongs to Avram, not as a slave, but he spiritually belongs to Avram. I identify with Avram in totality. Whatever Avraham's goals are, they're my goals. We share the same spiritual destiny. Who didn't? Who didn't? Well, we learned last week who did. Lot, after the experience in Mitzrayim, breaks from Avraham, correct? Avraham and Lot are not on the same page. This story is the opposite. Eved Avraham Anochi. He declares, he totally identifies with everything that Avraham stands for. There's no tension. There's no separation. There's no break at all between me. We are one and the same. And the Rav notes that the Torah teaches us to read this carefully because this is the same expression when we express what the Jew is supposed to be. What is the Jew supposed to be? Eved Hashem. What's an Eved Hashem? An Eved Hashem is just like Eved Avraham, but it's Eved Hashem. What does that mean? One's service to Hashem is supposed to be not an addendum to one's personality. It's not, I am this, I am that, and I'm the next, and I'm also Eved Hashem. No, not at all. What does Eved Hashem mean? In the true sense of the word, it means your entire purpose of life is being an Eved Hashem. Being an Eved Hashem isn't something foreign and incidental. It's intrinsic and it's inseparable who we are. It defines who we are. Eved Avram defines who we are. Eved Hashem defines who we are. Lot is using, Eliezer is using the same language that the Torah describes how a Jew is supposed to perceive himself in this world as well. You're supposed to be an Eved Hashem, not you're supposed to be something else plus Eved Hashem. No, you're supposed to be Eved Hashem beginning, middle, and end. And that's what Eliezer says who he is. Who am I? I'm Eved Avraham. This, like I said, is clearly opposite the earlier story that we saw with Lot after the encounter in Egypt. I want to make one other very important perception here and note. Eliezer took the initiative, correct? We've noted that. If Eliezer was not prompted by Besuel and Lavan, tell us about who you are. Tell us who your master is. Tell us about your background. No, that's not what happened. He's offering a monologue, presenting himself to Besuel and Lavan. In other words, he's not waiting for the questions. He's taking the initiative. What does that tell us about Eliezer? Eliezer, we're not even given his name in this story. We put two and two together and we come up, it's Eliezer. Because we don't know of any other master, any other servant that Avram, the Torah has identified as Avram's servant. So we know it's Eliezer, right? But we don't know much about Eliezer, but now we do. The Torah has given us, if you will, between the lines, a brilliant insight into who Eliezer is. Eliezer, I would like to suggest, is brilliant. He's strategic. He wants to control the narrative. If you want to control the narrative, that means you're strategic in everything you're doing. You're not waiting for things to happen. You make them happen. Eliezer does nothing without thinking what his next step is going to be. And this is what the story is telling us. By him taking the initiative, he's the strategist par excellence. And now we can get a picture. Not only are we getting a picture of who Rivka is, right? But we're getting a picture of who this Eliezer is. And that gives us 2 seconds, and that gives us appreciation of why he was so important to Avram, and why Evet Avram Anochi really represents who this Eliezer really is. Yes?
He's also not very slave-like in him to take control. He's to exercise initiative and freedom.
I'm sorry, I'm not following what you're saying.
He's not being slave-like.
No, not at all. I'm slave-like. I didn't hear him. Sorry.
Slave-like,
Yeah, 100%.
or servant-like.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think that's
It's
not
more
what
of
I'm.
an identity in terms of.
That's right.
Not a slave identity, but
It's not Eved Le Avraham. It's Eved Avraham. If I wasn't here, who would have been here? Avram.
Right.
And the way I'm acting, Avram would have acted. That's exactly what you're being told, 100%. I am in place of my master. It could have been him. It could have been me. We're one and the same. We're one voice. We act identical. I'm Evet Avram. Exactly what he's telling them. Right, exactly. Okay? So that's the first point that the Rav notes. The words Evet Avram is crucial. And number two, I've added the point that he took the initiative, and that reflects on who he is. A brilliant strategist, and he's not acting, like you said correctly, Linda, he's not acting like a servant. He's acting like he is in total control. And exactly what Avraham gave him. Avram endowed him, and he runs with it. He runs with the ball. Pasuk Nun Tes. Now jump to Nun Tes. The Rav wants us to take a look at something else. Something that would seem to be totally, the Rav is, if you will, scratching his head when he reads the story, and he's saying, huh? Well, so we know the whole story. We just read the story. We know the text. What happens in the story? So Lavan and Besuel send Rivka with whom? With Devorah. What? Isn't that what it says in Pasuk Nun Tes? Vayishalchu es Rivka achosam ve'es meinik ta. Who's meinik ta? Who's the meinik? Well, we're going to be told it's Devorah, her nurse, right? That's important to be told. Of all the information the Torah is telling us, of who's going with her, we're told seems to be inconsequential. Who cares about Devorah? Why is Devorah important, right? Why does the Torah tell us that she goes with Rivka to Eretz Canaan? It, by the way, is going to help us a little later if you take a look in 35:8, Lamed Hey, Perik Lamed Hey, Pasuk Ches. This is going to foreshadow and explain a problem we're going to have a little later in the story. Take a look on page 186. Vatomos Devorah meinekes Rivka, vatikover mitachas lebeis el tachas alon, vaikroshma alon bachus. Suddenly, we're told that she died. Devorah, suddenly in the story, in Parshas Vayishlach, we're told Devorah dies and she gets buried, and we know where she's buried. What's the problem? Rivka dies. We're not told about her death. Leah dies. We're not told about her death. Oh, we're only told about a Devorah. What in the world? It doesn't make sense. So this, the Rav notes, foreshadows and explains that issue as well. The Torah is teaching us a very important lesson. There are unique personalities in the world who change lives. They're not popular. They're not well known, but they change lives. We've all had them. I remember when I was a student at YU, I had just returned from Eretz Yisrael after 2 years in Keren Biafna. I had Rabbi Parnas. He was my Rebbe for 2 years. He was a phenomenal Rebbe. He had left an indelible mark on my thinking and how I learned, etc. And Rabbi Parnas, a master teacher, said to us now, I was 21 at the time. So he says, gentlemen, how many years have you been sitting behind the desk? You've been students for a long time. So if you started in nursery school or kindergarten, before nursery, there was nursery school, then kindergarten in those days. And those days we didn't go to school at 2. So now you can add much more. My granddaughter is a little nothing, and she's not even 2, and she's been in school for a year already, right? But I started at 4. Ghana and Gil, I remember that was the name of the nursery school in Cleveland. I started at 4. My mother finally put me in school at 4. And, from 4 until 21, you've had a lot of teachers, right? And Rabbi Parnas said, by show of hands, how many of those teachers can you tell me left an indelible mark on you, right? 5, 10, can you name them? Well, if you think about it, by then you're in college and you're having multiple teachers, and through high school even you had subject teachers, right? It's not like elementary school in those days. You had one teacher taught you everything in Limudei Kodesh, one teacher taught you everything that you had to know in Limudei Chol. Then now you have teachers for every subject, even now in the schools. They even have more teachers. So how many of them left an indelible mark? Some of them really did, but they're a handful, right? You'll remember them forever. I remember Mrs. Green. She was a teacher that had an indelible mark on me. Is she known? Is she popular? Nobody will know her. She's the Devora Menekes. That's what the Rav is telling us. There are certain people in the world that can change lives, and they do. And they seem to be inconsequential to the bigger picture, but they're not inconsequential. They're the ones that leave the indelible mark. They're the ones that change lives. Devora is the exemplar par excellence of this person, this type of person. Devora raised Rivka. She took, as the Rav says, a pagan girl in a pagan culture and made her on par with Sarah Imenu. That is not an easy task to achieve. Because you have to ask, how did Rivka go and become the great woman that she is? She was an ordinary pagan girl into a woman who was on par of Sarah Imenu. How did it happen? So let me quote to you the Rav. This is the Rav's words. Rebecca and her children listened to Devora and let themselves be guided by her wisdom. She was responsible for Rivka's education and secret loyalty to Abraham's covenant. She's the one. Why is she mentioned? Because she's the one who changed the world. She's never going to get fanfare. She's never going to get popular notice, but she's the one that's important. So the Torah sneaks it in, as if you will, under the radar. And that's exactly the personality of a Devora type. They get snuck in under the radar, right? And when they die, they get snuck in under the radar too, right? The family that was impacted by them will never forget them. These are the Devoras of society, and they're very, very, very important. So that pasuk is crucial. Now, continues on. We now go to, let's find out what Yitzchak is doing. Pasuk Samach Gimel. So she comes with Eliezer, Vayetze, and now the Torah gives us a split screen, right? It stops the Rivka story and it gives us the Yitzchak story. So what's he doing as she's approaching? Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basodeh lifnos arev. The Gemara in Brachos Lamed Amid Beis tells us Avraham was mitakein shachris. Yitzchak, how do we know Avraham was mitakein shachris? Vayashkem Avraham baboker el hamakom asher amad sham. Avraham rose early in the morning to the place where he stood. Amad sham. Shachris is said standing, if you will, erect. Your posture is a posture of Amida. And what do we call tefillah? Amida. When the Chazal talk about tefillah, it means the Shemona Esrei. And what do we call the Shemona Esrei? Amida. Why? Because you don't say Shemona Esrei like Tachanun. Tachanun is bent over. Tachanun is a totally different posture. The Amida, the Shmona Esrei, is like Avram Baboker. And we understand when you start a new day, you jump out of bed, you're ready to tackle it. The morning is one of Amida. That's Avram. Avram's posture is Amida. But what about Yitzchak? So the Gemara, that very same Gemara says, Yitzchak was Mitakein. He initiated, he created, he originated Mincha. And how do they know it? They quote this pasuk, Yitzchak lo suach basodeh. And what does lo suach remind us of? A pasuk in Tehillim, Perek Kuf Beis pasuk Aleph, Tfilo laoni ki ya'atov, v'lifnei Hashem yishpoch sicho. Right, a prayer of the afflicted man when he covers himself and pours forth his supplication before God. Lo suach connotes not a tefillah like Avram. Avram is strong, standing, erect. Lo suach is ki ani, lo-ani ki atov. What's ani ki atov? It's ani, it's the broken person. He davens. He does not stand upright. He's a broken man. Mincha is not like Shachris. Mincha is towards the end of the day. It's already, you're worn. You're physically and mentally and psychologically worn from this experience. The Rav notes that's the posture of Yitzchak. Why does Avraham have the posture of Amida? So the Rav says Chazal, the Kabbalah, it's more in Kabbalah, but it's Chazal. Chazal say Avram had the midah of what? Chesed. Chesed. He calls it he calls it a expansive kindness. Avram is kind to everybody. Who does Avram daven for? Everyone. It didn't matter. Tzaddik, Rasha, stone, right? He davens for everyone. Avram has a chesed for everyone. He's the one who prays for everyone. Moshe, by the way, is very similar. Moshe davens for Klal Yisrael by the Chedo Egel. So Moshe also has an Amida, if you will. He stands erect. When you present yourself on behalf of others, it's an Amida. But Yitzchak is not that. Yitzchak is not like, Yitzchak is Gvura. What do you mean by Gvura? Ezehu HaGibor? Who's the Gibor in Pirkei Avos? The one who conquers his Yetzer. He conquers his Yetzer. Conquers his Yetzer is not standing erect. It's just the opposite. It's demonstrating that you bent. Avram and Moshe share a posture because Avram stands ba'amida and Moshe stands ba'vayechal. Vayechal is one of amida as well. But, and by the way, the Amida, the Gemara says, of Avram and Moshe in particular, it's like a person grabbing onto his friend's jacket. Your friend can do you a kindness and you need him to do something and you grab onto the tails of his coat and you say, I'm not letting go until you listen to me, until you provide me what I need. That's Avram, that's Moshe. Not Yitzchak. Yitzchak isn't the exemplar of Chesed. He's the exemplar of Gvura. Gvura implies a withdrawal of oneself, an inward reflection. When one does this, he's not standing erect. Rather, he's bent over. He's stooped over. He's looking internally he's like the poor man, like the pasuk says. He's begging at the door. Moshe experienced this type of tefillah as well. Moshe experienced both. Moshe does that when? V'eschanon el Hashem. And Rashi says, tachanun is a gift. It's a gift undeserved. That's what tachanun is. How do we, by the way, do tachanun? Do we stand straight? No, we bend over. And I think it was my grandson who was talking, I overheard my oldest grandson, Moshe, talking to his brother, Chaye, 2 years apart. And he says, he saw me davening because I was going to leave. And he saw me, when I arrived on Friday morning in their house. So I had to daven. So I was doing tachanun and Chaye turns to Moshe and he says, what's Zadie doing? He says, oh, that's that funny davening. He says, that was his words. That's funny davening. They bent over, they're bent over. Yeah, that's tachanun. Okay, fine. That's tachanun, right? Now we can understand that's not Amida. That's the Yitzchak posture. He's begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At the end of the day, you're turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're worn out, and you do tachanun. And that's Yitzchak. Yitzchak's bent over. Lasuach, he's bent over. Now Rab Soloveitchik notes that will explain the next pasuk Samach Dalid. Vatisa, so that's Yitzchak going out. Lasuach basada, right? What does Rivka do? Vatisa Rivka es einea vatere es Yitzchak. She lifts her eyes and she sees Yitzchak in the distance. And what does she do? Vatipol me'al hagamal. And she falls off her camel. What do you mean she falls off her camel? She acts just like Yitzchak. Yitzchak is not the Amida, Yitzchak is Lasuach. She also gives her davening the same type of davening that Yitzchak. In other words, what is it telling you? It's very important here. This is a perfect shidduch. They're in sync spiritually. Totally in sync spiritually. Here, Eliezer brings Rivka. You could say, how do we know that Rivka is going to be the perfect shidduch? So this pasuk, Rav Soloveitchik says, is giving us the insight of it's a perfect shidduch. Eliezer chose brilliantly. How do I know it? Because Yitzchak is lasuach and she is lasuach as well. They share the identical posture. They share the same spiritual destiny, the same spiritual approach. Yitzchak bent over, so is she. It's a fascinating insight from Rav Soloveitchik. Finally, let's wrap it up. Vayiviel Yitzchak ho'ela Sarah imo. You have to read this pasuk so carefully. Vayikach es Rivka. We would expect that Rivka would need some time to adjust to the new culture, right? Become acquainted to a new lifestyle of Avraham's family, right? Interesting. She doesn't need, this pasuk is telling us what? She didn't act like a novice. She didn't need a training period. She didn't get a coach. A lifetime coach, right? Isn't that what we call a life coach? Yes. Life coach, a life coach. She didn't get anybody to instruct her how to act. This pasuk Chazal tells us reflects that Rivka was just like Sarah Imenu. You know that Rashi, right? The challah stayed fresh 1 week to the next. The candles burned one week to the next, right? And the anan, the cloud was hovering over their tent all week long. When one thinks about this, it's simply amazing. Who was responsible in training Rivka to be Rivka for this role? Rivka takes the place of Sarah. Who is it? Devorah. That's correct. That's how Devorah is so important to this role. You're looking back and you say, aha, I know who. Who is it? It's Devorah Menekes. Devorah, she was the educator who instilled into Rivka a love of Avraham's lifestyle, a love for what Avraham was preaching. Okay, Rivka demonstrates Gevura just like Yitzchak, by the way. Where is Rivka's demonstration of Gevura? So Soloveitchik says, go back to her brother and her mother asked her, are you going? And what did she say?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going. I'm going, right? Here, pasuk nun zayin on 118. Well, let's ask her. And they asked her, are you going with this man? In one word, she demonstrates ultimate gvura of Yitzchak. Vatomer elech. Yes, I'm willing to go. And by the way, Chazal, we always looked at the Chazal and Medrash. The Medrash says, in many, there are different midrashim, but the one medrash that we are all taught is how old was she? She's 3. That's not what Chazal mean. Chazal is demonstrating in an extreme. That's the way midrashim work. Chazal are extreme. In other words, she was so ahead of her time. She was so mature. She was like Sarah Imenu at a very young age. That's why she's able to fill Sarah's shoes. Now, let's take a look at this pasuk and read it carefully. There's a tempo to this pasuk.
Which one are we in?
The pasuk Samach Zayin, the last pasuk in this story. Pay close attention to the tempo of the Torah. And if you don't read the tempo of this pasuk, you're missing something. What happens here? Tell me what, in your own words, what happens? How many points is the pasuk telling me? First point is, Vayiviel Yitzchak Ohel LaSarah, right? He brings her into the tent. What's the next thing? Vayikach es Rivka, Vatilo li'isha. Point 2. What? And you can even, point 2 is even Vayeha Aveha. What? That's all point 2. What does he do? He marries her. First, he brings her into the tent. Then he marries her. And then,
He loves her.
no, he loves her as part of getting married. Okay. Vayinochem Yitzchak Acharei Imo is point 3. So there are 3 points. He takes her into the tent. He then marries her and loves her. And then she replaces his mother for her. What's going on in this pasuk? This reflects the fact that, tell me, did Yitzchak trust Eliezer? Of course he did. We know he's trusted. We know that back on pasuk base when Avram gave his entire estate to Eliezer's power. He gave him everything, the pasuk says. So Eliezer is trusted in Avram's house. That means Yitzchak trusts him too. So Eliezer comes back with Rivka, right? So he should, and he hears all that the pasuk told us. He tells him the whole story. So what should have Yitzchak said? Great, I'll marry her now. He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. That's the tempo. That's what you have to pay close attention to reading. What does he do? He dates her first. How does he date her? Vayikach, vayiviel Yitzchak Ohel Sarah imo. He brings her into the tent first. That's the dating, if you will. Why? So Rav Soloveitchik says he should trust Eliezer. Okay, this is a perfect shidduch. When it comes to marriage, halacha is demanding that we can't simply depend upon somebody else's report. You must find out yourself. You, Yitzchak, had to go out to Rivka and see, well, okay, Eliezer's singing your praise. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't for me. Eliezer is not Yitzchak. Yitzchak's not Eliezer. As much as we want to think he is, he's not. So what does the halacha require? Eliezer has to date Rivka on his own. Yitzchak has to date Rivka on his own. And that's what the beginning of this pasuk tells us. Vayiviel Yitzchak Ohel Sarah imo. And the words of the Rav, marriage is a personalistic commitment and existential union. 2 strangers decide to unite destinies, to share the same fate. This all-encompassing commitment cannot be undertaken on an outsider's word alone, no matter how loyal that outsider is. That's the first lesson this pasuk tells us. He dates her. So if you, Vayiviel Yitzchak Ohel Sarah imo is the dating process. Let me check out. Okay, I listened to your story. I'll check. I'll see. After he dates her, he says, she's what Eliezer described. I think it's a go. So then what happens? What happens then? Vayikach es Rivka vatihilo li'isha vayavah. Then and only then does he do what? Does he get married? He doesn't get married on the word of, that's what the Rav's pointing out. The Torah read very carefully is he doesn't get married on Eliezer's word. He gets married only after he tests it himself. Then finally, step number 3 and the final step, Vayinochem Yitzchak Acharei imo. This is the final point. Now he could move on. That's what the pasuk is telling us. Now Yitzchak can move on because he found a woman who would carry on his mother's legacy. It's not that Yitzchak was a mother's boy. That's not what the Torah is telling us. Rather, it's telling us that Yitzchak realized that his mother's legacy had to be perpetuated. And who's going to do it? Rivka. Until he found Rivka, he felt lost because he didn't feel that he had somebody who was going to perpetuate his mother's legacy. Once he marries Rivka, he realizes Rivka is the woman. The Rav adds a fascinating point. The Torah does not mention at the beginning of this parsha, Chaye Sarah deals with two stories. What are the two stories? Sarah's death and burial in Maras HaMachpelah, the purchase of Maras HaMachpelah, and what else? The story of Yitzchak finding Rivka being brought to Yitzchak as his wife. Those are the two stories for all intents and purposes. Okay, in the story of Sarah passing away, does the Torah mention Yitzchak at all in that story? Who cries for Rivka? Who cries? Sorry, who cries for Sarah? Only Avraham. The Torah doesn't mention at all Yitzchak. You don't think Yitzchak mourned his mother's passing? We only finally find out Vayinochem at the very end of the longest chapter in Chumash Bereshis, way after Maras HaMachpelah story has gone into history. Do we find Vayinochem Yitzchak acharei imo? That means what? Flashback. That means he mourned his mother. Clearly, he mourned his mother. He was very close to his mother. You can just imagine, right? But why is that only told to us now? So Rav Soloveitchik says, quoting the Gemara in Sanhedrin Chof Beis, Amid Beis, Ein Isha Mesa Elo Labala. After everything is said and done, when a good marriage ends because of death, the surviving spouse is the one who's lost. Ein Isha Mesa Elo Labala. When a wife dies, it's the husband that is the one who really suffers, and it's in reverse as well. And if the husband dies, it's the wife who suffers, right? She's the one, not the children. The children, of course, but not as much as the spouse. The spouse is the one who really mourns, and the Torah is telling us this little fact. Yes, Yitzchak, no doubt, mourned his mother's passing, but it didn't tell it to us then in Chaye, at the beginning of Chaye Sarah, because that's Avraham's moment of mourning. And the Torah wanted to feature that as very important lesson psychologically, and always for us to remember. When a spouse passes away, the surviving spouse, not the children, the surviving spouse is the one who mourns. I remember when my father died, my mother said, we were all going home, and my mother said to us, you're all going to your own homes, and I will live with the ghosts in the house. That was her words. I will live with the ghost in the house. Because Ein Isha, right? Ein Mesa, Ein, what was it? Ein Isha Mesa Elo Labala. Those are the words of Chazal. So the Rav points out, yes, you're going to hear about, of course Yitzchak mourned, but it wasn't important to tell us until this whole story ends. A crucial lesson about psychology of life. So the Rav, again, takes this longest chapter in the Chumash Bereshis, and he focuses on very specific psukim that teach us way more than just the story, the narrative of Eliezer finding Rivka. That's very important. And other Mefarshim will do it, but that's not what the Rav wants to do. The Rav wants to focus on lessons that we can take away for our own lives way beyond this story. He teaches us about Devorah, right? He teaches us about marriage. He teaches us crucial lessons. He teaches us about loyalty, who our identity is. Eved Avram Anochi, Eved Hashem Anochi, right? Who am I? Who am I supposed to be? That is being taught in this story, right? And those lessons are what the Rav focuses on in this parsha. Okay, and we'll pick up. Yes, please.
We don't know anything about Devorah, where she comes from. We know about Elazar, that he's money. We don't know anything about that.
That's part of it.
It's that exactly. That's the heroic personality. The Torah, as the Rav would say, the Torah is not interested in that history. That's so important psychologically for us to appreciate. The Torah is interested in something else, in telling you the person is what's important, not their background. Totally unimportant. You're not going to know anything about Devorah. You're going to know she was the nurse from Rivka, and she died. and they mourned her.
But Rivka, we learned her whole background when she met Eliezer.
Yeah, but you don't know too much about Rivka either. You don't know too much about any of these personalities. You know, this is not a history book.
No, no.
It's not a history book.
Yeah.
But between the lines, you're able to build the story, and that's what the Medrash does.
Right.
The Medrash fills in those stories that are missing because it's our nature. We want to know. So the Medrash fills it in.
Right, I mean.
But not
when
the
you say
text.
That like Rivka and Yitzhak was similar, I don't see it so much, I see.
Because you're gonna
Yes,
know the
yes.
next story. You're gonna know the next story. Yeah, the next story where
So different,
Grown apart,
opposite,
to have either grown apart in the course of their marriage, or to have been very different.
no, or they don't communicate.
right, they don't
Right.
communicate.
There's not very much talk between that, the Amek Dover, the Netziv points out. Very little conversation. We have conversations between Avram and Sarah. We have conversations
Right.
between Yaakov and Rachel. We have no conversations except one. And it's not, it would seem inconsequential that, so we don't know, they don't talk. But that doesn't mean that they're not thinking very similarly. They are. They're on the same page in many ways. And then with Yitzchak and with Yaakov and Esav, that's an interesting problem. How did they take different positions? Okay, but they may very well be coming from the same spiritual perspective. Okay,
Can it be that, because.
What, Marcia?
That Rivka was like.
What?
Introverted, that Rivka was introverted.
I can't hear you.
Can it be that Rivka was introverted, just like?
Rivka is introverted. That's the Amek
That's why
Dover. The
there wasn't
Amek
a lot of
Dover takes
conversation going
place.
on.
Personalities, yes, Rivka is introverted. So is Yitzchak, by the way.
So that may be.
Look, Avram is the outgoing, very popular person. Avram is the guy who stays to the very end of the Kiddush, schmoozing with everybody. There's nobody that he's not going to talk to. Yitzchak is the guy who sneaks out at the very beginning of the Kiddush and wants to go home. And he wants to learn. He wants to, he wants to open up safer and not be bothered. That's Yitzchak. Interesting, right? But Avram is more, and Yaakov is more like Avram than Yitzchak. Yaakov then reverts once again to that outgoing, but not right away. With Ishtam Yoshev Alim, he fuses both. He fuses the Avram personality with the Yitzchak personality, and he becomes the Yaakov personality, which is its own right. But that's a whole different issue. But anyhow, I think that the Rav once again demonstrates how to read Torah in a fantastic way that, until I see it, I wouldn't have ever thought of it. And then you scratch your head and say, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. Okay. We'll pick up next week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. My
Thank you.
pleasure. Okay.